sit, sit, sit. That's Harley, this is Cali. And then we have Bonzo over here. Bonzo, Bonzo. Sit, sit. That wasn't quite the right timing, but this is their roadmap to success. We also have Daisy, who is a little bit fearful. She's a three-legger, and she stayed inside because she wanted just to enjoy the peace and tranquility being inside by herself. All right, now the reason I was called in here is because Bonzo and Harley have gotten into it. Bonzo is kind of a little bit of a wild child. He likes to push the boundaries a little bit. Harley is the dog that is not the instigator of the fights, but he's the finisher of the fights. And he's a little bit bigger. They're about the same size, though. So from talking to the Guardians, I think a lot of these fights have happened when the dogs have been overstimulated. There's been a lot of excitement. A lot of it is humans. Most of us confuse excited for happy when it comes to dogs, but for dogs, excited is an unbalanced state of mind. If I'm going to have surgery, the last thing I want my surgeon to be is excited. I want her to be calm, balanced, and focused on what she's going to be cutting into or off of my body. If she won the lottery, I would want to wait for surgery. But for dogs, when we see them all excited, we get them more, you want to go for a walk? You want to go for a walk? Who is good? And we wonder why they can't listen. Well, if I'm super excited, that's not going to be the best opportunity for me to listen. So the Guardians have noticed it happens a lot at the door. Also when there's some reason for excitement. So I'd like you to make kind of a list of all the things the dogs do that gets them excited. And really what I do as a dog psychologist is I kind of create a situation where a dog has failed. The behavior it's demonstrated is not a behavior that I like or that I want. And so what I do is I recreate the situation where the dog displayed that energy, and then I help them practice how I want them to behave by making it the easiest version possible, and then breaking it down into individual steps. And I practice step one over and over and over until the dog's behaving the way that I want for step one, only then to go to step two. And I practice step two over and over. And I do that for all the steps and break it down as small steps as you can. And then once the dog can do all the steps independently, I have them to practice it together, again, in the easiest version possible. So in this case, no other dogs, no excitement, maybe sitting and being calm at the door or whatever the case may be. Then I gradually work it up to the point where somebody's pounding on the door and ringing the doorbell and there's craziness going on. The dogs have practiced the way they want. They know what I'm expecting from them, and they start performing the way that I want. All right, so because excitement has been a big factor for these guys, I talked a little bit, we started off talking about exercise. So the Guardians do a good job of walking them, but being two Australian Shepherds, they have a lot of energy, and they're working dogs. They need more exercise than a daily walk. And so I went over some creative ways of exercising the dogs. Walking is great, as long as we're letting our dogs sniff. Most people don't realize dogs burn more energy on a walk by sniffing than they do from walking. So make sure when you are walking them that you're letting them sniff and stopping to let them sniff. Instead of having a circuit, try to think of, if I got 10 minutes to walk, I'm going to walk this direction for 5 minutes, and then the dog sniff as much as it wants, then I cross the street and come back and let it sniff the other way around. Now, if you want to teach your dog to walk with you without sniffing, that's okay too. Just make sure it's not every walk, and make sure it's something you've trained your dog to do. A lot of us just expect our dog to go into 100% work on a walk and not enjoy anything. Dogs smell the way that we see. And so we don't do that. We have off-duty times. We have times when we play and jack around and have fun with our friends and recharge our batteries. Well, if every walk is let's go, let's go, let's go, that's not very much fun for the dog. It gets frustrated, the human's frustrated, the dog's not responding, and everybody's frustrated. It's not a pleasant experience. So try to trade it off. Eventually, you might want to do it like where you're walking like half, for one block, I want you to pay attention to me and keep your nose up. Maybe we practice that focus exercise I showed you. And then the other, come. The next block, we let the dog sniff around. But if your goal is to exercise the dog, let it sniff as much as it wants. We also talked about possibly using a doggy backpack or a dog harness. Other things you can do is the doggy stairmaster, where it's just really you throw treats up and down the stairs. Throw the treat down the stairs, the dog runs down the stairs and licks it up. Say the word Jamaica, means to go down the stairs. Remember, treat always goes in the mouth first. They hear the command word immediately after the treat goes in their mouth. Then you call the dog to the top of the stairs, give it another treat, and maybe call it Denver. And so now Denver means go up the stairs, Jamaica means go down the stairs. Come. All right, so let me see. So that's the doggy stairmaster. Make sure when you're exercising the dogs, they have nothing in their stomach. You want to give about 90 minutes after they eat before you exercise them. Walking is different. Anything or lateral movement, they can actually get in trouble and be fatal if their stomach flips over. Something else we talked about was scent games, where you basically hide treats and the dog's got to use his nose to find it. Make sure you're doing all these things separately for the dogs, at least at first. Eventually, some of these things you can do together, but scent games, you don't want two dogs going for the treat at the same time. That might create a fight or a problem. So scent games for dogs, the nose controls 60% of their brain, and it's very stimulating and relaxing and energy draining for them to use their nose. So they have to use their nose to find these treats in the house. That's a nice game that's fun for them. That's a good way to sneak in some exercise. Also, because the dog's nose is energy draining, or using the nose, feeding your dog out of like a snuffle mat is another great way to burn a little exercise, burn some energy and get some exercise by doing a regular activity. So right now the Guardians are free feeding. I would recommend they go to a structured feeding where the dogs are eating one at a time. And that way the dogs, each dog, all three dogs were practicing listening to what the humans are doing. Or excuse me, practicing not going and eating that food. I have to wait for permission. Now, all the dogs are free fed. They do actually a pretty good job on themselves by staying away from the dog that's eating. But we'd like the humans to be the ones that are controlling that situation. That's awesome. The Guardians behind the camera doing some good things. Okay. So, and while I'm thinking about it, one of the things I like to do is pull out one treat and tell the dogs to sit or lay down or whatever it is. And if I get three dogs, I say sit, and one of them sits, I give that dog the treat, and the other two dogs don't get anything. If two dogs sit, I rip the treat in half and give each of the dogs that complied. So I'm paying based on performance. A lot of us make sure I'm going to be fair. All the dogs are going to get a treat. Well, then the dogs don't have any motivation to listen to you. The only exception I would make for that would be Daisy, because she is your fearful dog, and I don't want her to kind of be a wallflower in the background and just not get rewarded for that. So we might actually, again, have to bring her out one at a time and help her practice the activity in the easiest version possible so she builds some confidence to doing so. All right. If the Guardians right now muzzle Bonzo at times to make sure that nobody gets hurt, but they use a snout muzzle, the one that wraps around the snout, and that can be actually dangerous for dogs if they're really worked up. You really want to use what's called a basket muzzle. It looks like the football player face mask, and that one allows the dog to open their mouth and they can breathe and they can cool themselves down. You can give treats, they can drink water. That's a better way to go about it. But if you're going to use a muzzle, you really need to muzzle train the dog. The dog should actually have a positive association with the muzzle. I've got muzzle training videos on my website. If you can't find it, message me. I'm happy to share it with you. All right, so basically exercise is a multiplier or an amplifier. It can make it easier for you to fix the problems, or it can amplify the problems that you have. So if you're going to have people coming over, exercising your dogs before the people come over can be a way to set them up for success. Just make sure the dogs have 10 minutes to recover after the exercise before this next thing happens. So, and something else that people don't ever think about, you can exercise your dog before a walk. So if you play fetch or the tree toss on the stairs, then give your dog 10 minutes to recover, then go for a walk, you're gonna have a much more productive walk. Now the dogs here get very excited for the leash, and so I would suggest you go to my website and search for Calm Leash. There's a video that I have, actually a couple of videos, that show you how you can teach your dog to be calm on the leash. I don't want to go through it here because it's going to be a long video to begin with, but please go there and check that out and practice leashing your dogs up separate from the other dogs when you're not planning on taking for a walk. So now you desensitize them from it, make it not such an excitable activity, and the dogs are more relaxed and more willing to do that. Now, the Guardian is on the porch trying to teach the dogs to sit, and all three of them are sitting. When you do this, when you're doing treating, you want to keep your the treat within an inch of the dog's nose. So tell Harley to sit, touch his nose, and go straight down, but keep it within an inch of his nose. If he stops tracking, go back to his nose, and don't pull upward. Go touch his nose and go straight down. Oh, you're not going to give it to him, touch it, and then you want to lure him down. So go ahead and touch his nose and lure straight down to the floor. Go all the way to the floor. Keep going. Pull your arm away. As soon as he gets up out of a sit, you bend your arm away. Tell him to sit. Now you said sit 3 times. Now, right now, you have 2 other dogs there, and also Bonzo is right there. Bonzo is laying down, which is what we like, but Harley may not feel comfortable lying down that close to Bonzo. So if we're teaching a dog, we want to teach in the easiest situation possible. So, all right, and now one other thing before I forget, Bonzo is a very jealous dog. So if I'm petting Harley, Bonzo comes up here and tries to insert himself. Tries to get that attention. A lot of the Guardians, a lot of my clients pet both dogs. Well, that's allowing Bonzo to steal from Harley. So what I do is, what I did during the session, you can do this other times as well, is if I'm petting Harley and Bonzo comes up, I might hook my thumb around Bonzo's collar and hold him at a distance and continue petting Harley as much as I wanted. When I got done petting Harley, if Bonzo was protesting, I let go and he doesn't get any attention. If he was just sitting there passively, then I would turn and give him my full attention. So I decide who I'm going to pet. The dog can't come and try to take it. Also be mindful of Bonzo. He has a tendency to try to kind of block access. So if you're seeing that he's here and he's not, and the other dog's over there, and the other dog tries to go this way, that way, the other dog might be trying to get to you. Bonzo might be kind of blocking the situation. So if that's the case, we need to make sure we intercede. Remember, for dogs, anything that they are doing in our presence that we don't specifically disagree with is the same thing as pretty much as agreeing. So not saying no is very similar to saying yes. So make sure you're burning the energy to stand up and to disagree or do what you need to, so you're acting like a leader from a dog's perspective. Okay, also remember, a growl is not aggression, neither is baring the teeth. These are things the dog is saying, I disagree, I don't like this. You're going to the direction of a dog fight, but I don't want that. I want to prevent that. So I'm growling to say I disagree. If I get punished for growling, a lot of dogs are like, that's fine, I won't growl or give a warning, I'll just go straight to a bite. Same thing with baring teeth, that's also another warning. Speaking of dog warning signs, I'd like the guardians to kind of keep an eye out for it. A dog normally, when it's relaxed, it's going to be kind of, the body is going to be kind of a little bit wiggly. They're going to be, their body's going to be relaxed. The head is going to be kind of in a nice position. Ears are nice and relaxed. And one of the things I'd like you to do is kind of take stock of your dog's ears, tail, how it's holding its head, its overall body stiffness or relaxedness when they are nice and relaxed. You have to first know what the baseline or the normal neutral behavior, body language is. Then you start seeing deviations from that. Then you start being concerned. So once you've kind of done that, and you might play a game with each other. Just be like, oh, the tail. It's the tail. I don't know if you can see in the shot, but if this is the dog's head and this is the spine, my shoulder across my right here, and then the tail. If the tail is kind of in the middle, that's kind of what we'd like to see. If the tail is just drooping down, that's, for a lot of dogs, that's normal. If it's going between the legs, that's phallic, almost in a phallic way, that's an insecurity or fear. Remember, anything a dog is doing when you pet it is what you're rewarding. So if you pet a fearful dog or an anxious dog or a scared dog or a barking dog, jumping dog, you're rewarding it for that actual activity. So I'm going to talk about a way to do that in a positive way. But if your dog is nervous, you can lay your hand on them. They do associate that touch with affection, but as you start petting, you're going to amplify it. Best thing to do when dogs are reactive is increase the distance between them and whatever they're reactive to. Now, dogs learn through repetition, consistency, and good timing. You have essentially 3 seconds to correct or reward them for them to have the ability to make that connection. But it has to be repeated a certain number of times in a row, and every dog's number is different. Also, the situation matters. What other things are going on? Is the environment really busy? And so things along those lines. So now also, because anything a dog is doing when we're petting it, we have to pay attention to when that is, and I'll talk about petting with a purpose here in a second. Before we get to that, going back to the kind of structural things that we went over, we also talked about rules. For dogs, in the dog world, there isn't an alpha. Alpha dog is a misnomer. The person who came up with the expression actually recanted. It doesn't exist. It doesn't exist for wolves either. Dogs share leadership. There's a dog, if I'm in charge of hunting, another dog's in charge of eating the food. When I bring the food home after hunting, the other dog takes it from me and says, okay, see the line of dogs? Go wait at the end of the line for your little portion. As humans, that blows our mind, but that's how dogs are. They have little departments that they're in charge of. And so for dogs, if they don't see us enforcing rules, dogs go through life kind of probing. How they learn is they probe, and they're waiting for somebody to say, that's too far. That's too far. If we're consistent about when we disagree, that's how they learn that that's where a boundary or a limit is. And so a lack of rules tells dogs often that we are peers. And if a dog sees you as a peer, listening to you now is optional. And most of the people, they don't want to have that dynamic. You can get away with a lack of rules if you have one dog. You have multiple dogs, especially if you have herding breed dogs, it's really hard to do that. Come. All right, so basically, a lot of us think of rules as a negative, and enforcing rules as being mean, and breaking the rules is a good reward. Remember, you can reward your dog by rubbing its belly, taking it for a walk, playing tug of war, playing fetch, whatever it is. Don't break a rule to reward the dog. Remember, the rule should be in place for a minimum of 3 months or as long as the problems are still going on. And at the end of that period of time, relaxing the rule should be on a one-time basis whenever you feel like it. Now, the dogs here I'm just remembering this, like to go and kind of fence fight a little bit. There's a little gap in the fence, so look for some dowels that you can get put in there. You don't necessarily have to go the whole way up. Go from the rocks, really probably to your middle thing, maybe a little bit higher than that. You probably only have to get about 4 feet. But if you do those dowels in between each one, or you can put wood in front of it, I just think the dowels would probably be a little bit cheaper. More work, but a little bit cheaper. All right, come. Going back to rules, I define a rule as things the dog likes to do, wants to do, has the ability to do, but doesn't do it without your permission or an invitation. So the more rules that we enforce, the dog sees us acting like leaders, because burning energy is like a form of currency for dogs. Crash. passive training. We'll talk about that in a sec. Okay, so some of the rules I went over. The first rule I suggested is not allowing the dogs on the furniture, and this is important because the dogs, the higher they sit, the more rank or social status they have. We have dogs that are all kind of jockeying position. So one dog may be on the couch next to the two humans and might kind of bare his teeth at the other dog saying, hey, you stay away. Humans might not even see it because we're watching TV, but that dog is now blocking and kind of hogging up the couch for itself. So what I usually recommend is no furniture at all for 90 days or as long as the problem's going on. At the end of that period of time, if I would like to share the bed or the couch with Harley, I do it because I feel like it, not to reward him. Get belly rubs and all the rest of the stuff to reward him. So you might want to get those X mats for the furniture. They're only about $11 a piece. I know it's an expense, but it just will do a lot of work for you. And the furniture is a big one, and it's just easier, especially when you leave. The dog's gonna get up on the furniture, so that prevents that from happening. You get up, go to the bathroom, you grab it from under the couch, fold it, put it back where you were sitting. Go get it, go to the bathroom, come back. Dog runs up while you're gone. Oh, it's occupied. So those X mats are really great. Teaching dogs to use a dog bed on command. You can throw the treats like I talked to you about. If you forget how to do that, I have a video for that. Let me know, and I'm happy to share it with you. Okay, so other rules we talked about, you have to sit at the door. The guardians here leave the door open a lot of the time, which is okay, but I would start incorporating maybe for a month where we're going to keep it not. Well, actually, you might, for this one, I mean, all this is backwards. I'm guessing in a month, the guardians are probably not going to leave the door open because it's going to be Nebraska and Iowa. It's going to be 1,000,000 degrees outside. So what I do for the rule for the door is I tell the dog to sit one time. If the dog sits within 3 seconds of me saying sit, then I open the door. I only say it once. If it doesn't sit within 3 seconds, I sit down near the door and I wait for 1 minute. After 1 minute, I go back to the door and I command the dog to sit. Don't ask, and I only say it once. If they don't sit this time within 3 seconds, I walk away and I sit down for 2 minutes, then for 4 minutes, then for 8 minutes. Keep double the length of time. Eventually the dogs will go sit at the door as their way of asking to go outside, because as soon as they sit, you're going to open that door. But since we have multiple dogs here, if I tell the dogs to sit and one of them sits and the other 3 don't, I would let the dog that sits out and not let the other dogs. We're paying based on performance. Eventually they're going to do it with, you can do it both directions with the door, and I would do that with the dogs. You could do it with all of them at the same time, but you might want to do it, start out with doing it one at a time. It's a little bit easier always training dogs to do it one at a time. I would also do that before you let him out of the kennel. For Bonzo is in a kennel. The other dogs have a kennel, but it's not closed. You want to let him outside through the gate, open the car door to let him in or out. Anytime they want to go through a doorway, make them sit first. When I'm walking dogs, I make them also sit at every corner. It's just a good practice thing, and it helps them practice dialing in a little and paying a little attention to you, kind of like the exercise I did towards the end of the session with the clicker. Okay, so other rules: you shouldn't be allowed. The dog should not be allowed within 7 feet of any of the other dogs when they have a bone. Typically, when Harley has a bone, Bonzo tries to come over and invade his personal space, and that's how dogs try to take things from each other. We need to intercede and say that's not allowed. So if Harley sees that the humans are interceding, then he feels more confident in their leadership and is less likely to think that he needs to handle things himself. And also Bonzo sees the humans are not letting me go and try to take his stuff, so that must not be an approved behavior. Now he likes what he gets, so he's going to continue trying to do that. Now I just noticed this. Drop. That didn't quite go the way I wanted. He has a dummy here. We use this to teach dogs for recall. So basically what you want to do is when the dog has this in its mouth, have a treat, hold the treat in front of them. Don't say drop, just wait. When the dog drops it, put it in their mouth and don't show any interest. Don't pick this thing up. And so that way the dog wants to actually drop it, because that means dropping it means you're going to give me something, I get it back. Now if you're playing fetch, make sure you're saying fetch 3 times. As I throw it, I say fetch. When the dog picks it up, I say fetch. And then when I hold the treat out, when they bring me the object and pop the treat in their mouth, then I say fetch a 3rd time. You want to play fetch? Now dogs also like playing tug of war. This is a fun game for them, but right here we'll be able to do a little bit of a drop. Drop. Sit. I make dogs sit before we play fetch. Sit. I want them to demonstrate a little control. So he's just ready to go, but it's my game, my rules. If you want to play this game, sit. And the instant he SATs, I'm going to throw this thing so fast he's not going to believe it. Sit. You're making me repeat myself. This is why petting with a purpose and passive training are helpful, because it helps the dog understand that if I don't sit, I'm not going to get what the human wants. Sit. Come here. Sit. I'll cheat a little bit more. Sit. Oh, you're almost there. Sit. Fetch. So now I'm associating all the elements to it. And fetch is a great way to exercise as well. But a lot of us, we just continually pull it away from the dog. That's why they don't want to bring it to us or drop it, because we're demonstrating that we're actually thieves. So when he has it, and when they have items in the house, there you go. Drop. And then I can pick it up, sit, sit. And you saw that interaction right there. He came over, he's deferring. Harley's a good dog. He's trying not to get in fights. He's kind of rude and has not the best manners. He's a little petulant and he's a little spoiled. And so he just, I want. Well, that's not, if we have one dog that's behaving well and one's not, we don't want to reward the dog that's not. And then unfortunately, that's a little bit of that's been going on. So sit. 3 seconds, you don't comply, then I don't throw for you. All right, so other rules: shouldn't be allowed to be within 7 feet of any of the humans who are eating, and then also not be allowed in the kitchen when the humans are eating. Now, I have videos on my website, Sit, that you can search for invisible or kitchen, and it will explain how to keep your dogs out of it. But it's really the same exercise I showed you when Bonzo was barking at me. You're going to stand up, walk towards the dog, and walk towards the line. Once you get to the line, that's where you stop enforcing it. And watch those videos because they go through it. If you can't find them, let me know. I'm happy to go over them with you. Let me see. What else did we go over? We went over petting with a purpose and passive training. Sit. Petting with a purpose is, let's say he comes over and nudges me. I would tell him to sit, just like I did there. He has 3 seconds to sit. If he doesn't sit within 3 seconds, playing hard to get works great for dog training. So if he doesn't do what I want, I lean back, pull out my phone, hang out with the wife, watch TV, read a magazine, show him that I have other things to do. If you don't do what I want, I don't care. I got other things. It didn't bother me at all. When you do this, after a while, the dog realizes I can't tell you what to do. I have to ask, and better than ask, I have to pay. And I'm paying for through a currency of obedience. Sit. 1, 2, 3. What will happen is that after a while, the dog will start coming and sitting in front of you to prepay for that attention. When it does that, make sure you reach over and pet it. Remember to pet it under its chin and say just the command word. Don't say good sit, good boy, Harley, just sit. And then you pet it much or as little as you want. And if he doesn't sit, he doesn't get any attention. After a while, like I said, he'll start sitting in front of you to prepay for that attention. When he does, make sure you recognize and reward that. Otherwise, he'll go back to nudging you. Now, remember to also use the watchword of paycheck. So if you suspect someone, if I'm petting Harley and he's standing up, somebody might suspect that I forgot to pet him with a purpose. So they say paycheck. I would stop petting him, even if I did it right. Tell him to sit. If he sits, I pet him on his chin, say sit. Then I can explain to the person, I actually asked him to sit. I did it right. You missed it, but thank you, because I do forget to pet without a purpose. We don't realize how often we do this. Sit. So he just wants what he wants, and he's used to getting what he wants. He's not going to get that anymore. And after a while, he's going to recognize as soon as I sit, that's when he throws it. And after a while, you make him sit and wait 1 second before he throws it. Sit 2 seconds before he throws it. We want to build in opportunities to practice some self-restraint, self-control. Sit, and he's just off to other things because he's used to doing that. So it's going to be a little bit of a transition period for a week or two. But eventually he'll come over and sit when you're doing this, because he knows that's as soon as you sit, but make sure as soon as he sits, you throw it right away, because otherwise it's hard to make that connection. Remember, 3 seconds is your maximum. Okay, we also taught, if you get in a habit of petting with a purpose, it increases the dog's respect for you as an authority figure. It increases the dog's confidence because they're earning the affection. It helps them practice basic obedience, and it makes your pets more valuable, because if the dog doesn't do what you want, it doesn't get petted. It makes it more precious. And that will help with your dog's performance. We also talked about passive training. Passive training is waiting for the dog to organically offer you the behavior that you want without asking for it. So when the dog came to me, I pet it and say, come. When the dog sits, I pet it and say, sit. When it lays down, I pet it and say, crash. I would come up with a unique word for each dog to eat. So maybe say meatball, pork chop, and lasagna. So if maybe lasagna is Bonzo's word. So every time he takes a first bite of food for 4 months, you say the word lasagna. Well, the other 3 dogs hear lasagna, there's no food in their mouth. But when he hears lasagna, there's food in his mouth. That becomes his command word. So when they bring you toys, name this thing. Call this Woody, or whatever you want. Come up with funny names. Remember, dogs can read facial expressions. So try to come up with fun command words. If people smile and laugh when you say the command, that motivates the dog to want to do that. I'd like you to make a list of the official command words, all the vocabulary that you're going to go through. What's your potty word? What's the word that means come? What means lay down? Sometimes we have people in the house that are using different words, and now the dog has to learn all these variants, different words of a different command, where it's easier for all of us just to use the same come or here or whatever the command word is. We also talked about so for passive training is what we're doing is we're celebrating the things the dog does that we like. So right here, Cali came, come. I didn't ask her to come. She just meandered over here on her own. But that's still a come, so I recognize and rewarded it. I take away the baggage of me asking her to come, because sometimes we ask dogs to do things, once they do it, they lose our attention. By not doing it, we keep on asking them to do it. So passive training is just us being observant and celebrating the things the dog does that we like, and after a while that will motivate the dog to want to do that. Instead of prepay, the dog will prepay for attention, but it also, when you ask it to sit, it's like, oh, sit equals getting a treat, sit equals getting some pets or attention, or sit equals David throwing the dummy, and so I get to play fetch. So again, you have to create a dynamic where the dog has a motivation to listen to you. Most of us just love our dogs, we give it everything at once, and we don't understand why it doesn't listen to us. It doesn't have any motivation or reason to listen to us. All right, I'd like to have the female guardian in the house whenever possible feeding the dogs. And I would, because dogs eating is really important activity. Now be careful when you are going to structured feeding. If there is some territorial pissings, we don't want to cause fights, and it's possible that happens. Typically, as long as they're 7 or more feet away, it's not going to happen, but you can exercise the dogs ahead of time and again set them up for success. Now I'd also like the guardians to get a snuffle mat or snuffle mats and start feeding the dogs out of the snuffle mats. It'll make the feeding process longer, but it allows it slows down the feeding, and also it's almost like exercise because they're using their nose to find all that kibble. You can't use that for wet food, you can do it for dry food. But I would get in a habit of doing that, get a couple snuffle mats, because it's a nice way to build in a little bit of exercise really easily. And again, before you feed them, exercise them, give them 10 minutes to recover, then go through the structured meal thing that I'm talking about so we take away that extra energy. Sit. You were just sitting to jump up. Let's try to do that one more time. Sit. Nope. Sit. Fetch. So again, sitting is what causes the person to throw it. All right. Harley, come here one more time. Harley, come here. Cali, come here. Well, this is Harley. Cali, come here, Cali. We're going to invite you to jump up, which normally I'm paid to not do that, but that's Cali. You saw the Bonzo, I would say Bosco. It's been a long day. But basically, this is their roadmap to success. Now, before I get to that, I guess, here we go. Bonzo, yeah. Okay, the thing I did forget to talk about were the dog's warning signs. So we talked about talking about them here. I'm going to go through these real quick. So basically, the first warning sign is typically a freeze and a stare. So the dog's kind of hanging out, their mouth is open, they're nice and relaxed. So they close their mouth, they get still, their body gets stiffed, and they stare. So that's about 3 or 4 warning signs all combined together. So if you see the dog going from this to this with a closed mouth, that's something to pay attention to. Now, sometimes they just close their mouth to catch a breath or whatever it is, but if you see it in conjunction with something, I want to pay attention to that. If there is a fight, we don't want to say anything or yell, because a lot of times before a fight, sometimes that'll cause the fight, and during the fight, they're hysterical, they're not going to listen. So what you're looking for is, we talked about earlier, the relaxed body language. And so we know what the dog's head looks like, the ears look like, the tail looks like, the overall body mechanics. Well, then we start seeing these differences. So all of a sudden the dog freezes and stares, often with a lowered head, or they look intentionally away. Sometimes they sniff the ground, that's a displacement behavior. Sometimes they shake it off, that's also a displacement behavior. Calming signals are things that dogs do to try to prevent fights. So if you see the dog, the things you want to look for: staring, freezing, breathing heavily or holding their breath. The hackles, if you see on a dog like Cali, it usually is between their shoulder blades and between their hips, and along their spine, the hair will fluff up. And so that's also an indicator. Often the ears will often go very far forward or really go far back. So the head will sometimes go in a certain direction. The body will look stiff and uncomfortable. Like I said, dogs earlier, they're kind of jiggly and relaxed. If you see them going from like this to very regimented, that could be an indication that something's about to happen. So learning to recognize these warning signs can put you ahead of the game, and that way you can actually get the dogs out of that fight before they go through it by practicing the focus exercise that I showed you. Another video that I have on my website, if I don't have it included and linked, if I don't have it linked in the write-up, just let me know. I'm happy to link it in there for you. Remember the focus exercise, make sure you're touching your nose and you're not saying the word until it goes into the dog's mouth. And remember, you hold it here, and we don't say anything. Do it with one dog at a time, and you wait for that dog to look in the eyes. The only thing you can do is looking at it. wiggle, don't call the dog's name, don't kind of look down here to get its eyes, boom, boom, and make sure you do it inside. And again, focus is another thing to search on my website, and you'll be able to find a whole bunch of videos for that. All right, well, Callie's hanging out here. Bonzo's up there, and so is Harley, and Daisy's inside like she has been the whole time. I'm wearing red because it is Friday, and for COVID, we're celebrating healthcare workers by wearing red on Friday. So if you're a healthcare worker watching us, thank you for saving people's lives. All right, well, my name's David, and this is the Dog's Roadmap to Success. Remember, everything you do trains your dog, only sometimes you mean it.